Legendary filmmaker Robert Zemeckis has confirmed that he's going to be using AI to de-age actors like Tom Hanks in his new upcoming movie called Here. But Robert Zemeckis' name just doesn't hold the same promise as it used to. And it made me think, what was the last real great Robert Zemeckis movie? When it comes to movie lovers, Zemeckis has had a sort of fall from grace because often big ambition from him doesn't often have the same reward as it used to. With that, let's get into a quick history of Robert Zemeckis. He first made waves with his movie Used Cars starring Kurt Russell, and that movie has sort of become a cult film throughout the years. But his first film that really sent him on the journey that he's on with studios today is Romancing the Stone. Zemeckis made Romancing the Stone in 1984 for 20th Century Fox with two big stars at that time, Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. If you've seen the 2022 film The Lost City with Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum, Romancing the Stone is literally that. Similar plot, similar vibes. Kathleen Turner plays a reclusive author named Joan Wilder who embarks on an adventure to save her sister who's being held hostage and find this mythical diamond along with Michael Douglas, who's basically playing the American Crocodile Dundee. So yeah, they go on this adventure across Colombia to find this diamond. Danny DeVito's great in it too. What's interesting about Romancing the Stone is the studio executives saw an early cut of the film before it was released and they were not impressed. Zemeckis was at the time supposed to helm Cocoon, which came out the following year and was eventually directed by Ron Howard. Great movie, by the way. But he was removed from the film because executives just weren't impressed by the early cut of Romancing the Stone. That said, when the movie came out in theaters, it became a huge box office hit and thus sent Zemeckis on the legendary journey of Back to the Future. Of course, one of the most beloved movies of all time. Whatever quote you want to drag out, whatever character, whatever song, there's something for everyone. Do I even have to talk about why Back to the Future is so legendary? But not only was Back to the Future a massive cultural and box office hit, it spawned two sequels, which I guess solidified Zemeckis' place as a reliable studio filmmaker with ambition and with a creative voice. But right before releasing the Back to the Future sequels, Zemeckis directed a very important movie in his career and in movie history, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The movie's blend of live action and animated characters was ambitious at the time and really paid off with audiences. Both critics and audiences loved it and still do today. It won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects. Zemeckis was reunited with Christopher Lloyd and Kathleen Turner. The movie made over $350 million and just continued to show that Zemeckis was reliable with directing blockbusters and utilizing new visual techniques, which is going to be a constant throughout this video. And then we get to the incredible Forrest Gump. This movie also had some revolutionary visual techniques like weaving Tom Hanks in with deceased celebrities like John F. Kennedy and John Lennon.
I gotta pee. I believe he said he had to go pee.
It was just also this incredible epic that didn't sacrifice substance for style. I've already talked enough about Forrest Gump, but it is a masterpiece and it won multiple Oscars, including Best Picture and Director for Zemeckis. Zemeckis also continued to please sci-fi fans with his fantastic alien movie, Contact, which is a movie I love that stars Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. So now Zemeckis is beloved with critics, he's reliable at the box office, and he has an Oscar. Where could he possibly go? Well, in 2000, he made two very different but very interesting movies that show where his paths start to diverge. First of all, What Lies Beneath. It stars Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford, and is a sort of typical sort of suburban thriller that you would see today. It did very well at the box office, though not as well with critics. It showed Zemeckis doing some more things he wasn't really used to, like diving into this thriller genre. It also dealt with some special effects with the jump scares and so on. But again, it just wasn't as big of a hit with critics. I'm not a huge fan of the movie personally, but I know it does have its fans and I understand why some enjoy it. And then the other film he made in 2000, do I even have to say what it is? It's Castaway. Castaway was again a huge hit with audiences, still is. It got Tom Hanks another Oscar nomination and continued to show that maybe Zemeckis and Hanks together, they got a good thing going. And I think Castaway was sort of the final film that was this widely beloved by Zemeckis. Where Zemeckis probably started to run out of luck was his experimentation with this different form of animation. Did you watch The Polar Express growing up? Well, yeah, that was Robert Zemeckis. The movie was an entirely digital capture movie, which meant all the actors, including Tom Hanks, were on set, but they were performance captured and then brought into this animation world. Something similar that you would see like Spielberg's Adventures of Tintin. Critics said that the animation just felt lifeless and honestly uncanny, and I understand where they're coming from. I enjoyed this movie growing up. I'm kind of scared to rewatch it because I've heard that it just holds up so badly.
You guys want to hear Sicko Mode or Mobamba? Sicko Mode or Mobamba.
The movie still made a lot of money. It's made $426 million, but it's where critics really started to diverge from that love for Zemeckis that lasted almost 20 years at that point. And Zemeckis didn't back down from this criticism. He made Beowulf and A Christmas Carol with those same animation techniques. A Christmas Carol in particular was a massive box office bomb, and neither critics nor audiences were particularly a fan of Zemeckis' new adaptation of the Charles Dickens novel that had Jim Carrey playing Ebenezer Scrooge in a similar performance capture animated world. Going into the 2010s with Zemeckis' career, he becomes very unpredictable. He's not trying to stick to one thing, but he also doesn't have that same confidence or trust that he had going into the 2000s, you would say. So I want to take a look at these movies and finally answer the question of what the last great Robert Zemeckis movie truly was. So first of all, we have Flight. The movie was a hit with critics who called it a return to form for him, and it was also nominated for 2 Oscars, including Best Actor for Denzel Washington and Best Original Screenplay. The movie follows Denzel as an airline pilot who manages to miraculously land a plane after a disaster in the air, but soon he starts to be investigated for what possible responsibility he might have had in the injuries and deaths of the passengers in the crash landing. It's a really interesting movie. Denzel is terrific in it, and it shows you a character who isn't necessarily empathetic or likable, but just shows you for his flaws and his sort of attempts at redemption that may or may not succeed. It's a well-paced film, even though it's almost 2 hours and 20 minutes. The flight scene itself is really brutal and really well put together with the visuals and sound, and I'd highly recommend this film. It also did excellent at the box office, making over $160 million. So overall, this movie was considered a great success for Zemeckis after some films that made him lose some street cred. Fast forward to 2015, we have The Walk. The Walk unfortunately did not enjoy the same success as Flight did at the box office, but it is a really terrific movie. I watched it in theaters in 3D, and the experience is really stunning, and I think this is where Zemeckis was starting to play as much with the technical elements as is anticipated with this next film here. The movie follows Philippe Petit, who's played really well by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who comes from France to New York in order to follow his dream, which is to walk a wire between the twin towers of the World Trade Center, which sounds like a crazy idea, right? You know, with that sort of inspiring true story elements and the lovely visuals and Joseph's performance and the great pacing, this movie really works. I really enjoy not just the technical elements, but the entire story and script. A year after that, he released Allied, starring Brad Pitt and Marion Cotillard. The movie set in World War II, where Brad Pitt and Marion Cotillard play 2 spies posing as a couple in order to assassinate some Nazi leader in Morocco. Soon they fall actually in love and start a family, but start to grow suspicious of each other as the threat of Germany looms in the continued efforts of the war. This is a movie I actually watched kind of recently, and I enjoyed it a lot more than the critics did. I think it has around 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I actually, once I think like the second half kicks in, I started to really like it. The movie doesn't have great CGI. When he uses some green screen, you can notice, but man, the story's really enjoyable. The costumes and set design are really convincing. It was nominated for the costumes Oscar. Brad Pitt's genuinely excellent in it. I think it's a solid war movie that utilizes fiction and real events quite effectively. I don't know if I would call it great though. Next in 2018, we got Welcome to Marwen. Critics despised it, did not do well at the box office, and it's about a victim of a neo-Nazi attack, and he's dealing with the trauma of his attack by building a miniature set and basing all the characters off the women in his life. And so a lot of the movie is actually through the miniature figures who are played by the actual actresses in the movie like Janelle Monáe and Leslie Mann who are putting on mocap suits for these miniature coming to life and going to war scenes. And I think in this movie is where we started to see that ambition falling again. The Witches came out in 2020, and this did not help Zemeckis' case at all. The movie is another adaptation of Roald Dahl's book, and the reason I say another is because Angelica Houston starred in one in the 80s, I believe. This one has Anne Hathaway and Octavia Spencer, but again, it flopped hard with critics, and I don't believe audiences were big on it either. And then in 2022, we have the absolute stinker that is Pinocchio. This is probably the worst of the Disney live-action remakes. Like, wow, it's so horrible. I'm not even gonna get into how bad this is, but I think it really shows how Zemeckis' love for these big CG experiments. It wasn't just that, but so to finally answer the question, even though I like Allied, I'm gonna say that the last great Robert Zemeckis movie was The Walk. This is a really great movie. I feel like it's still underrated, even though it got really good reviews from critics, just because a lot of people haven't checked it out like I hoped. Again, it didn't really do great when it was released, even though it was advertised and coming out with all these big formats and so on, including IMAX 3D and whatever. But I really do recommend The Walk. It's honestly one of my favorite Joseph Gordon-Levitt performances as well. And it's probably the last time that I had confidence in Robert Zemeckis utilizing all these big visual tools, because now with Here coming out, even though people are already concerned about AI, it's not like we feel like we're in great hands seeing that Robert Zemeckis directed it. It seems like it's another experiment for the sake of experimenting. But I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love to see what he does with this new film. Even if the visual effects don't pay off, I'd love to see what the movie's about and what Tom Hanks is doing in it. So thank you for taking this trip with me through Robert Zemeckis' career. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram at Film Toppings, where I'm most active, and check out more like this coming very soon.